Experience is a double-edged sword. It helps you avoid big mistakes, but it also makes you stop noticing the small ones. For seasoned sailors, confidence slowly turns into routine. And routine is when critical checks quietly disappear. Some boats don't sink because of poor seamanship, not because of bad weather, but because silent structural damage is ignored for years, until it's too late. Today, we're looking at 5 boat mistakes that quietly sink boats, and most sailors over 50 unknowingly overlook them. One of these mistakes gives you proof that everything is fine, right up until the boat is gone. The first mistake usually begins with a very familiar belief: the illusion of stainless steel. Stainless steel is trusted almost blindly by many experienced sailors. It looks clean, but stainless steel is only stainless as long as it can breathe. It needs oxygen to maintain its thin protective layer. When stainless steel gets trapped in a tight sealed space, like where a chain plate passes through the deck, salt water can creep in, but oxygen cannot. That's the place no sailor ever sees and rarely thinks about. The protective layer breaks down. It can't regenerate. Crevice corrosion begins. After decades at sea, many sailors rely on visual inspection. It looks fine, and that's the danger. When a chain plate fails, one side of the standing rigging disappears. In 1 or 2 seconds, the mast falls the other way. Steel wires can whip across the deck, damage the hull, or injure the crew. This isn't a theoretical risk. There are many first-hand accounts from boat owners. A 36-year-old Island Packet 31 looked perfectly normal until the chain plates were removed and found to be brittle and porous due to crevice corrosion. A 1990 Island Packet 35 was dismasted the same way. A sudden chain plate failure, and the rig went overboard. A southerly 420 was dismasted near the Manacle Rocks in light conditions when the port side chain plate failed due to hidden corrosion. The owner had to make his first Mayday call. So, don't just look at the stainless steel itself. Check the surrounding structure. If moisture is present, corrosion is already happening inside. Have you ever found a small issue on your boat that turned out to be serious later? Share it below. It might save someone else's boat. If stainless steel can fail quietly, the next metal on this list fails even more invisibly. It's the belief that a Seacock is still safe simply because the handle still turns. Many owners take pride in original brass fittings from the 1980s. But brass is not immortal. Brass is an alloy of copper and zinc. When it sits in seawater for decades, an electrochemical reaction slowly dissolves the zinc from the metal. From the outside, the valve looks unchanged. But structurally, it's no longer solid metal. It has become a porous, sponge-like shell. That's why experienced sailors get fooled. The valve still looks intact, still opens and closes smoothly, so replacement gets postponed, because changing a Seacock is expensive and unpleasant. What isn't visible is that the valve body may now be held together by only a few weakened strands of metal. Once brass has pinked, it loses strength. A foot during engine work or a vibrating hose doesn't bend it. It snaps instantly like chalk. Surveyors have documented countless brass Seacock failures for this reason, like a nightmare. And because Seacocks sit at the lowest, hardest-to-reach points of the hull, failure means a 2 to 5 centimeter hole directly through the boat. At that depth, seawater floods in at hundreds of liters per minute. Without a correctly sized wooden plug already within reach, stopping that flow is nearly impossible, and the boat sinks fast. That's why experienced sailors keep a tapered wood plug tied to every seacock. When failure happens quietly, that small habit can be the difference between damage and sinking. If you're sailing an older boat, or planning to, and you care more about staying safe, reducing effort, and avoiding expensive surprises than chasing speed or trends, this channel is built around that reality. Subscribe if long-term ownership matters more than short-term excitement. Once you accept how fast water can enter a boat, the next mistake is trusting it will ever leave on its own. It's about the bilge pump illusion. This mistake isn't about having water in the bilge. Old sailboats always do. The real mistake is trusting the life of the boat to a cheap mechanical system, without a backup. Surveyors and long-time owners report the same pattern. Many boats sink at the dock after a bilge pump or float switch quietly fails, often when batteries are weak. Most boats don't sink from a sudden hole. They sink from accumulation. A slow leak adds weight. The boat settles lower. Drains and vents that were once above the waterline begin to flood. Water enters faster than before. That's the loop, and it usually starts with relying on a single pump and thinking it's been fine for years. Debris builds up. A cable tie or sludge traps the float switch. The pump still runs when you test it by hand. You hear it and you leave. But when you're gone, it never turns on. The pump runs, but not hard enough to save the boat. And then a small, harmless leak can quietly sink a boat in less than 48 hours. A fellow owner put it simply, 4 or 5 days of rain is all it takes. Check your batteries and your bilge pumps before your boat sinks at the dock. One pump is a gamble. More pumps and an alarm buy you time. If you want to understand how small, old components quietly become structural risks, there's another video on this channel that connects directly to what we're talking about here. The mistake number 4 is one of the quietest mistakes of all: forgetting the aging scupper hoses. These are the hoses that drain water from the cockpit straight back to the sea. A light rain after a sunny day. Small waves slapping the hull while you're at anchor. Water runs into the cockpit, then disappears through the drains. It feels simple, safe. And that's why most sailors stop thinking about them. Scupper hoses sit out of sight, tucked into corners, rarely inspected. Many were installed when the boat was new, 15, 20, sometimes 30 years ago. On boating forums, there are many reported cases of bilge leaks traced back to scupper hoses. One user described a hose splitting just before the through hull, causing continuous seepage, caught early, fortunately. So, where does the real risk lie? It lies in aging. UV exposure, salt, heat cycles, and time harden rubber and vinyl. The hose becomes stiff, brittle, and cracked. At first, the damage is invisible. Then a hose cracks or separates, often near a bend or through hull. Water stops draining out. It drains in. Rain and cockpit spray feed the bilge until a small trickle becomes a steady accumulation. Leave the boat for a few days and the bilge fills. The pump can't keep up, and the boat sinks, quietly, in the place it once felt safest. The check is simple. Squeeze the hose. If it feels stiff, brittle, or you hear cracking, replace it, especially on older sailboats. For you, which of these mistakes is the easiest to overlook? And why does it usually get ignored? The final mistake, and perhaps the most overlooked, comes from a habit many experienced sailors develop over time: keeping the rig too tight, even while the boat is resting at the dock. For many long-time owners, cranking the shrouds and backstay until nothing rattles feels sensible. A tight rig looks clean and sails well. But fiberglass isn't steel or timber. Under constant load, it slowly creeps and deforms. When near maximum rig tension, often beyond the recommended 15 to 20% of breaking load, is left on while the boat sits idle. The shrouds pull the hull sides inward, the mast drives continuous compression down, and the hull begins to deform. One owner shared a textbook case. Years of over-tightening led to the mast leaning 5 to 10 degrees to starboard. The hull deformed around the chain plates so badly that they had to be removed and the entire area rebuilt in fiberglass. These changes don't happen suddenly. They show up as oil canning, gel coat cracks, and leaking deck joints, weakening the structure until water finds a way in. The fix is simple, but often forgotten. When the boat isn't being used for long periods, ease the backstay and adjustable shrouds if applicable, just enough to let the rig rest and remove continuous load from the hull. Because boats rarely sink from one big mistake, they sink from loads that never get a chance to relax. Most boats don't sink because of storms. They sink because of small things we stopped questioning. Habits that once made sense, quietly turning against us over time. Experience doesn't fail us, complacency does. Not in one dramatic moment, but in years of "it's been fine." Older boats don't ask for perfection. They ask to be questioned again. One system, one assumption at a time. And if you're sailing later in life, especially solo, there's a video on this channel about boats that were designed to forgive mistakes, reduce fatigue, and keep working when things go wrong. That's the one you'd watch next.